You know, there's something nobody talks about in spiritual circles. Something everyone feels but pretends they don't. You've meditated for years. You've read the books. You've had those moments. You know the ones where everything suddenly made sense, where you felt connected to something vast and infinite, where the ego dissolved and you touched the eternal. And then one morning you wake up and feel it. That pull, that ancient magnetism, that heat rising in your blood, lust, raw, undeniable, insistent, and you think, wait, what happened? I thought I was done with all this. I thought awakening meant I'd be above these things. But here's what's really happening, and this is crucial. The desire never left. It was always there. What's changed is that now you're aware of it. Fully, completely, achingly aware. And that awareness, my friend, is precisely what makes it so intense. Let's talk about something simple. Why have spiritual traditions across the world been so afraid of sexual pleasure? I mean, think about it. When people talk about living a spiritual life, what's the first thing that comes up? Usually, it's about renouncing desire, especially sexual desire. Now, this isn't just one tradition. You find it everywhere. East, west, north, south, different cultures, different times, same message. If you want to reach the heights of spiritual attainment, you've got to leave sex behind. But why? Why single out sexual pleasure from all other pleasures? Why not be equally concerned about the pleasure of eating good food, or listening to beautiful music, or watching a sunset? Here's the thing, sexuality represents our deepest connection to the physical world. Through sex and through eating, we become most intimately involved with matter, with bodies, with flesh, with mortality itself. And spiritual traditions have always been suspicious of the physical world, not because it's evil necessarily, but because it's impermanent. It falls apart. Bodies that are young and beautiful today will age and wither. Everything material is constantly dissolving. So the fear is this: if you attach your heart to something that's crumbling, you're going to suffer. Better to set your heart on the eternal, the unchanging, the spiritual. Better to detach from the body entirely. But here's where it gets interesting. Sexuality is something you simply cannot get rid of. You can fast and reduce your relationship to food. You can give away your possessions and live simply. But sexuality, it's woven into the fabric of your existence. You exist because of it. Every cell in your body carries that memory. So what happens when you tell people that this fundamental aspect of their being is dangerous, dirty, wrong? There's an old principle here, and it's utterly reliable. The best way to make something irresistibly interesting is to forbid it. Tell someone they can't have something, and suddenly that's all they can think about. Prune a hedge, and it grows back thicker. Repress a desire, and it sends roots deep into the unconscious, feeding on the darkness you've given it. For centuries, spiritual traditions haven't eliminated sexuality. They've made it psychologically dominant. They've turned natural desire into something shadowy, exciting, and guilt-ridden all at once. The taboo doesn't destroy the desire, it amplifies it. Now here's what most people don't understand about spiritual awakening. There's this fantasy that goes something like this. One day, after years of practice, there's a breakthrough. The clouds part, light floods in, and from that moment forward, you're serene, detached, beyond it all. Desire falls away like autumn leaves. You become essentially perfect, calm, pure, untouchable. But that's not what happens. Not even close. What actually happens is this: you become more sensitive, not less, more. Awakening doesn't subtract your humanity. It doesn't delete your instincts. What it does is turn up the lights. Suddenly you can see everything, the beautiful and the uncomfortable, the transcendent and the awkward, the spiritual and the sexual. Before awakening, desire runs on autopilot. It's in the background, unconscious, automatic. You feel attraction and you react without really noticing the process. It's mechanical. But after awakening, the whole mechanism becomes visible, crystal clear. You see the desire arise. You feel it spread through your body like heat through water. You notice every thought that follows, the fantasies, the justifications, the guilt, the excitement. It's all there, completely exposed in the light of awareness. And this is the shock that nobody prepares you for. It doesn't go away. If anything, it feels more intense, because you're no longer half asleep to it. Imagine you've been living in a dimly lit house for years. You know your way around, but you can't see the details. Then one day, someone installs brilliant lights in every room. Suddenly you can see everything. All the dust you never noticed, all the cracks in the walls, all the clutter in the corners. The dust was always there, but now you see it. That's what happens with lust after awakening. It was always present, humming along in the background, but now you're awake to it, fully awake, and that can feel overwhelming, even frightening. People say to me all the time, I thought awakening would make me pure. I thought I'd transcend all this physical stuff. Why do I still feel desire? Why is it even stronger now? And I tell them, because you're awake, and the awake person feels everything more deeply. Think about it. When you wake up from literal sleep, what happens? Your senses come alive. You hear sounds more clearly. You feel the temperature of the air on your skin. You taste your coffee more fully. Spiritual awakening is the same. It's not about becoming numb. It's about becoming alive, truly, radically alive. And that means feeling everything, including desire with an intensity you never experienced when you were sleepwalking through life. This is not a failure. This is not a sign you've done something wrong or that your awakening wasn't real. This is simply what it means to be a conscious human being. The struggle isn't because you're broken. The struggle is because you're awake. Let's sit with something difficult for a moment. Every body you've ever desired will eventually decay. That face will wrinkle. That skin will sag. Those eyes will dim. The form you long to touch today will in time become dust. If you could speed up time and watch the whole process in a few seconds, you'd see flesh melt away like snow in spring sunshine. This is the ancient fear at the heart of all spiritual teaching about desire. Don't get attached to what's impermanent. Don't build your happiness on a foundation that's already crumbling. Don't set your heart on beauty that's fading, even as you reach for it. And there's truth in that, isn't there? If your entire sense of well-being depends on physical appearance, yours or someone else's, you're setting yourself up for suffering, because change is the only constant. But here's what I want you to consider. Does impermanence make something less valuable, or does it make it more precious? Think about cherry blossoms. In Japan, people gather by the thousands to watch them bloom. Why? Because they only last a week or two. Then the petals fall, and they're gone for another year. If cherry blossoms bloomed year-round, nobody would write poems about them. Nobody would travel to see them. The beauty lies in the brevity. The same is true of bodies. The same is true of moments. The same is true of everything in this physical world. Things are beautiful because they don't last. Because they're here now, in this moment, alive and breathing and real, and then, like everything else, they transform into something else. The awakened person sees both truths simultaneously. They see the beauty and they see the impermanence. And this creates a kind of bittersweet recognition, a tender grief mixed with profound appreciation. It's like watching a sunset. You know it's going to end. You know in 10 minutes it'll be dark. But that doesn't diminish the beauty. It intensifies it. You watch more carefully because you know it won't last. But there's another layer here that's even deeper. The body isn't just a temporary shell. It's also an expression, a creative, playful, utterly unique expression of the intelligence that animates everything. You are not just a body, true, but you're also not separate from your body. The body is the universe wearing a costume. It's consciousness exploring what it's like to have hands and eyes and skin and nerves. When you touch another person, you're not just touching flesh and bone. You're touching the mystery itself, dressed up in human form. So yes, the body is temporary. It changes, it ages, it eventually dissolves, but that doesn't make it trivial. That makes it sacred. The struggle comes from holding both truths at once. The body is fleeting and the body is holy, and somehow living in the space between them without collapsing into either extreme, neither clinging desperately to the temporary nor rejecting it as worthless. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable, something spiritual people really don't like to admit. The way so many seekers pretend they're above all this, you see it constantly. The meditation teacher who only speaks about higher consciousness and never admits to feeling ordinary human desire. The yogi who cultivates an image of perfect serenity while secretly wrestling with intense fantasies. The spiritual leader who preaches detachment while quietly indulging in exactly what they tell their students to renounce. There's a powerful unspoken belief in spiritual communities. Being advanced means being free from desire, and so people create a split within themselves. There's the spiritual self, the one who meditates, speaks softly, radiates peace, reads sacred texts. And then there's the animal self, the one who gets aroused, feels attraction, wants things, and the spiritual self is supposed to be in control. The animal self must be tamed, controlled, transcended, kept on a tight leash. But here's what actually happens. The more you repress something, the more power it has over you. The more you try to rise above desire, the more desire becomes your shadow lurking in the basement of your psyche, growing stronger in the dark. You know about shadows, right? Whatever you refuse to look at doesn't disappear. It just operates outside your awareness, usually in ways that are far more destructive than if you'd simply acknowledged it honestly in the first place. And the struggle becomes unbearable because nobody talks about it. Everyone's afraid to admit they still feel desire, because admitting it would mean, so they fear that they're not truly awakened, not truly spiritual, that they're frauds. But the real fraud is the pretense. The ego absolutely loves to disguise itself as purity. It loves to say, look at me, I'm above all that messy human stuff. And this might be the subtlest trap of all, because spiritual pride is still pride. It's just ego wearing robes. The person who thinks they're beyond desire is often the most controlled by it, because they've made desire their enemy, and whatever you fight, you strengthen. True awakening doesn't create a war between spirit and flesh. True awakening dissolves the illusion that there ever was a war. Let me show you something from a completely different angle. What if lust isn't a problem at all? What if it's simply energy? Neutral, natural, impersonal, expressing itself through you. Look at the universe. It's fundamentally creative, right? Stars explode into being, galaxies spiral, plants push through concrete, birds build nests, spiders spin webs. Life reproduces itself endlessly, taking on new forms, new patterns, new expressions. This creative force, whatever you want to call it, expresses itself through polarity, positive and negative, expansion and contraction, male and female, light and dark. The entire dance of existence arises from the interplay of opposites. Without polarity, there's no movement, no creation, no universe. In ancient traditions, this was understood deeply. The creative power of the cosmos was represented as the union of opposites, not as enemies locked in battle, but as lovers locked in embrace. Sexuality, then, isn't separate from spirituality. It's one of the primary ways the creative intelligence of existence expresses itself. It's how the infinite plays at being finite. It's how consciousness explores itself through form. When you feel desire, you're feeling the same force that makes flowers turn toward the sun, the same force that drives salmon upstream, the same force that explodes in every supernova and whispers in every seed. The problem isn't the desire itself. The problem is identification with it. Let me explain what I mean. When you think, I am someone who desires this person, you create suffering. You've made the desire personal. You've turned a natural energy into my desire, my lust, my problem. It becomes tangled up with your sense of identity, with your story about who you are and who you should be. This is what spiritual traditions mean by non-attachment. Not that you don't feel things, but that you don't mistake the feeling for who you are. When you watch a fire burning, you don't say, I am fire. You say, there is fire. You observe it without becoming it. In the same way, when desire arises, you don't have to say, I am lustful. You can simply notice, there's desire, there's heat, there's energy moving through this system. And something miraculous happens in that simple shift. The desire doesn't control you anymore. It's there, yes. You feel it, but you're not imprisoned by it. You're not at its mercy. You become the space in which desire appears, not the desire itself. And from that spaciousness, you can respond consciously rather than reacting automatically. You can feel the pull without being pulled. You can acknowledge the energy without being swept away by it. So how does an awakened person actually live with desire? Not by destroying it. That doesn't work. Not by repressing it. That makes it worse. And not by indulging every impulse compulsively either. That just creates a different kind of prison. The way through is awareness. Pure, simple, non-judgmental awareness. When desire arises, you feel it completely. You don't push it away. You don't pretend it's not there. You don't shame yourself for feeling it. But you also don't drown in it. You don't let it sweep you into unconscious action. You don't lose yourself in the fantasy. You become like a still pond. Ripples appear on the surface, wind, rain, stones thrown by passers-by. The ripples disturb the surface, but they don't disturb the depth. The pond remains fundamentally unchanged. In the same way, desires arise in your awareness. They create ripples. You feel them. But the awareness itself, the deep pond of your being, remains untouched. This takes practice. I'm not going to lie to you and say it's easy. It's not something you master in a weekend workshop. But gradually, you begin to notice a shift. Desire stops being a compulsion and becomes simply a sensation, an energy, a passing phenomenon. And here's what's beautiful. When you stop fighting with desire, it loses its grip. When you stop treating it as forbidden, it stops being so fascinating. When you stop believing, it makes you impure. It stops creating guilt. Desire becomes just another part of the weather inside you, sometimes sunny, sometimes stormy, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent. But just weather, passing clouds in an open sky. And you know what happens then? You actually become free. Not free from desire, that's not the point. Free in desire. Free to feel it without being controlled by it. Sometimes you'll act on desire, sometimes you won't. But either way, you're not owned by it. You're not driven by it. You're not tormented by it. You're simply a human being experiencing the full spectrum of what it means to be alive in a body, with all its energies and impulses and strange beauties. The struggle ends not when desire disappears, but when you stop fighting it, when you stop dividing your experience into spiritual and unspiritual, pure and impure, acceptable and unacceptable. All of it is part of the dance. All of it is the universe expressing itself through you. You are the space in which the dance happens. And nothing that appears in that space can stain it, diminish it, or take away from its fundamental nature. Let me tell you something important. You can't transcend what you haven't first accepted. You can't go beyond the body if you're still at war with it. You can't realize your true nature while pretending half your experience doesn't exist. The spiritual path isn't about becoming something other than what you are. It's about recognizing what you've always been And what you've always been includes everything. The light and the shadow, the transcendent and the embodied, the infinite consciousness and the finite form, with all its messy, beautiful, complicated humanness. The end of division. So here's where we've arrived. The spiritually awakened person struggles with lust, not because something has gone wrong, not because their awakening was incomplete or fake, not because they're failing some cosmic test. They struggle because they're awake, because they're sensitive, because they haven't numbed themselves to life. They feel the pull of desire and the call to presence at the same time. They see the beauty in form and the emptiness behind form in the same glance. They recognize themselves as infinite awareness and finite organisms simultaneously. And yes, that creates tension. Of course it does. You're trying to live as both the ocean and the wave, as both the eternal and the temporary, as both the witness and the participant. But here's what I want you to understand. That tension is not a problem to be solved. It's the creative edge where real transformation happens. The struggle only becomes unbearable when you think you shouldn't be struggling, when you believe that awakened people don't feel desire, when you imagine that spiritual realization means transcending the messy reality of having a body. But the truth is simpler and more compassionate than that. You are not a spirit trying to escape a body. You are not a prisoner trying to break free from flesh. You never were. You are the universe expressing itself as a human being for a brief, brilliant moment. And every desire you feel, every attraction, every longing, every impulse is the cosmos exploring itself through your particular form. There is nothing to fix, nothing to overcome, nothing to be ashamed of, only everything to notice, everything to feel, everything to understand with clear, compassionate awareness. The struggle ends when you stop struggling, when you stop treating parts of yourself as enemies, when you stop dividing reality into acceptable and unacceptable, holy and unholy, spiritual and physical. The awakened life isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness means embracing everything. The desire and the awareness, the body and the consciousness, the human and the divine, they were never separate. That was always just a story. A useful story perhaps for a time, but just a story. When that story dissolves, what remains? Just this, just you, just life, happening through you, as you, without division. And in that recognition, even lust becomes something beautiful, not because you've conquered it or risen above it, but because you've finally stopped fighting with it, because you've seen it for what it really is, another expression of the creative force that breathes through everything. The sacred and the sexual, the spiritual and the physical, the eternal and the temporary, all one dance, all one play, all one mysterious, magnificent display of what is. And you're not separate from any of it. You're the whole thing, waking up to itself. That's the secret nobody tells you about awakening. It doesn't make you less human. It makes you more human. Fully, completely, unapologetically human. With all the beauty, all the messiness, all the desire, all the awareness that comes with being this impossible miracle, a conscious animal, a mortal God, a finite expression of infinite mystery. So, if you still feel desire, good. Feel it. Let it move through you. Watch it arise and pass like weather. You're not doing anything wrong. You're doing everything right. You're awake. And awakeness feels everything.